So already I'm off script, but thanks for coming to this session. I'm Andy Fass. I'm the Forest Industry Specialist with UNH Cooperative Extension. Over the border, I love our Vermont friends. But I work a lot with the industry around market development and workforce development. Been working for a while with a lot of colleagues and partners and collaborators on trying to support development of mass timber using local species. We're joined by Chloe Gross planner with Southwest Region Planning Commission. I can let you say a word about yourself now or when you come up.
I'm Chloe, I'm from Southwest Region Planning Commission. I am working on the Timber for Transit project right now, funded by Northern Border. I also do some housing work, and transit and municipalities. We're kind of we do everything all the time, so there's always something going on. And I'm really excited to be here.
And Ricky McLean with Mass Timber Advisors. And Ricky, I can let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a structural engineer. I've been involved in the wood products industry I was involved, I guess, in the wood products industry for about a decade, and then about a year ago, I started my own structural engineering company as well as mass timber consulting company. So I do a combination of engineering for local projects that are some are mass timber, some are not, as well as projects that are mass timber outside of the region or working with potential mass timber manufacturers. So trying to combine both of those mass timber and structural engineering passions that I have.
What's the name of your company again?
Mass Timber Advisors.
Got right to the point with that. Yeah, I like it. Right.
So how many of you were here at a similar sort of session last year? Yeah. So in a lot of ways, this is kind of a continuation in some ways of what we did last year. We talked a little bit about Glulam as this potential new market in the region. What is it? We had a manufacturer that was showing interest in producing some glulam made from SPFs. And so we're going to talk about SPFs, which is spruce pine fir south. So US grown spruce fir and eastern hemlock. That's the other product that could potentially be turned into glulam. It's currently being used for CLT. So Hanson Bridge was interested in getting certified to produce glulam with SPFs or domestic spruce fir. A lot of interesting stuff last year. We wanted to follow up with it this year with some case studies and sort of talk about what happened with that. So we'll do a brief overview of glulam itself, just to bring everyone up to speed. I think you all are probably pretty familiar with it, but then do a little bit of a case study from the supply side. So we have this manufacturer that's now certified to produce glulam with local species, and then also a case study from the demand side, where Chloe's going to talk about what they're doing to try to help kind of promote the use of engineered wood in bridge construction and sort of help pull that industry along. And then just finish up with some summary thoughts and hopefully some discussion too, so we can talk a little bit. Mass timber, we heard a lot about this. Real briefly, it's taking small bits of wood and turning them into larger pieces of wood. Usually, or most often, with mass timber projects or CLT projects, we're usually thinking in terms of CLT, which are these. You're taking lumber and creating a layer one direction, all glued together, and then 90 degrees doing another layer, 90 degrees back and forth, sort of like plywood, right? And you can create these giant panels, and they'd be walls, ceilings, floors, anything that's wide, it could be a panel. Then you have glulam, which is the same idea. You're gluing these together, but instead of next to each other in these different orientations, they tend to be in the same direction. So you imagine a bunch of 2x6s stacked on top of each other, right? All glued together, that would be our glulam. And those are more beams and columns. And so between the panels, that's the CLT, the glulam, that's the beams and columns, or beams and columns. This is why I'm the forester. You don't want me building your house. But between those, you get your skeleton. And as we heard about earlier today, this is something that's really interesting and exciting for so many people because the It stores carbon in the built environment. And what I love is that it aligns these kind of economic interests with environmental interests. And often those are perceived as these conflicting things, and they don't have to be. And this is just a great example where everyone can pull together in the same direction. We're thinking about Glulam. We're using, when we say lamb stock for Glulam, that's just the lumber, fancy name for lumber. But when you have, let's say, 2x6 lumber, you call it lamb stock. So the lumber we're gluing together, often it's 2-inch thick, and it can be variable widths. So depending how wide you want your beam and how deep it is, you can have a certain width, like 2x6 would be a 6-inch wide beam. And then you can just start layering 2x on top of that to get whatever depth you want.
Are you using then just raw lumber, or are you getting it dressed?
You have to get it dressed.
You're getting it dressed at 2 inches?
Yeah, or actually, so it's less than that. Yeah.
So
So,
you are, okay, so
yeah,
you're
so
more than
2-inch rough, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so the idea is, dressed lumber, so you cut nominal, sizes like a 2x6 is nominal. We're calling it 2x6, but it's actual sizes. Yeah, once you plane it all down flat. No, that's a great
Is
question.
there a benefit to gluing it together rather than just screwing it together?
It's just a different product, and I'll let Ricky answer that right now if he wants to.
Yeah, Paul, probably the biggest benefit is the lack of manual labor required to drive the screws. But there's some other things too, like screws, there's differences in how they perform long term, where screws could yield, they start to crush the wood around them. You get more and more deflection over time. So the adhesives provide a better long-term stable product.
Structurally, it unitizes the beam.
Yeah.
The glue does?
It unitizes it, it's all in effect one piece. For a long time, the best exhibit of that was the base lodge at JP. When Weyerhaeuser put that up, a very early version of that, I think, and those are 8-inch wide by 18-inch deep by about, it must be close to 50 feet long with a slight arch to it.
Right.
Incredible.
Yeah, and so I guess, going back to that then, yeah, it's, there's different ways of adhering this lumber together. Technically, they're different products with different trade-offs, and then Ricky's gonna talk later about the testing process with Glulam, and that gets to that point of it's basically one member where the wood's gonna break before the glue does. So you're not, if you try to pull it apart, the wood's gonna tear before the glue, comes apart. So slightly different, I guess, functionality and sort of how it performs. So one of the nice things, so with oftentimes our Glulam, and we'll talk about it later, but at least around here, what these folks are doing, they're using 2x6 lamb stock. This is really, really helpful for us because we're trying to develop this CLT market, and they use 2x6 hemlock, Eastern hemlock, and SPFs. It's not as big a deal for SPFs, but this Eastern hemlock CLT market's entirely new. And people typically don't dry and dress hemlock. They use it green, so you don't dry it or surface it or anything. So imagine you're the first mill starting to do this. You have to produce 1,000 board feet of dried 2x6 hemlock. Are you gonna, some of it, when you dry it's gonna degrade, and there's gonna be a downgrade in terms of the grade as well as, defects will show up. So it's very hard to predict exactly how much is gonna happen through the drying process. So one way or another, as a manufacturer, you have to get more inventory to dry. There's gonna be some loss. You don't know what that's gonna be. So right now there's only one market. So all that extra material you buy, you sit on it. It's your inventory. And no one else, you have to wait for the next hemlock building. That's a huge deterrent. If you have just even a second market with hemlock beams, you can start channeling that excess material to those beams. Yeah.
What makes hemlock more attractive, say, than spruce fir is?
Spruce fir is better, or I shouldn't say that. Spruce fir is an established market, and it's ready to go. So most people would want to start with spruce fir, and right now it's just easy. Like if you call and order a CLT panel or a Glulam panel, they can just deliver that. Eastern hemlock's an underutilized species. For 40 years, people have been saying, "Oh, I get paid the same amount." That's actually the voice. I'm not making it. That's the voice. You know, we've been getting paid the same amount for hemlock for 40 years. When are you guys, Catherine, when are you gonna develop a market for Eastern hemlock? Andy, you know, so we're trying to do that now, and there's barriers. You know, this is a new supply chain, but it allows, you know, folks to make more money, have more options for silvicultural options. So often with high-graded stands, when you do poor forestry practices, usually you cut the best, leave the rest. That's often hemlock and scraggly, poorly formed, less vigorous hardwood species. So the idea that you can cut hemlock profitably, you want to do that, then suddenly you can change if you want to. So everyone's not going to do it better, but if you want to do better practices, you can. So I'm going to.
Well, the problem with hemlock is that in the drying process.
Yeah.
In the drying process, hemlock is less dimensionally stable than the spruce and fir.
And that's why a lot of people, so hemlock's a lot harder to dry, and a lot of people when we were doing this said that's never going to work.
That's okay.
But we found that you can do it, and we had similar laws. It's more temperamental.
Yeah.
You know, it's harder to dry, but we've had similar laws as hardwood through this process. Yeah.
Are you air drying it, kiln drying it, vacuum drying it, or is there?
Yeah, so it should be air dried. You know, it needs a lot more air drying time to do this cost effectively. They put it through pre-dryers as part of, you know, the process to emulate air drying. But that's not really as cost effective as if, but all this, you need to have an established
But then you're
market.
sitting on it for a year or so when it dries.
Yes, yep, so you're sitting on, you'd have more inventory, so, sorry, I'm taking up all that, yeah.
Exactly.
Are knots and other defects acceptable in a structural beam, or?
Yeah, and so there's different, and Ricky will talk about different grade requirements for different types of mass timber products. So with Glulam, you can have different layups, they call them, where you need different grades of lumber throughout. For, in this case, we're using 2 and better. For the Glulam, just uniform 2 and better throughout that whole Glulam beam, and that's also what's used currently with like the domestic U.S. manufacturers I'm aware of, or basically everyone I'm aware of, is using only 2 and better through all their layouts, though they don't have to. They can use 3 along, you know, some of the orientations. So this can be used for buildings, right? Bridges, which we'll hear about, and you know, there's even some other applications and uses for Glulam or markets that they could go to. We don't have any New England Glulam manufacturers up until now, so that's why we're so excited about this. And we haven't had use of Glulam from species in our forests. So there's SPF Glulam that's made in Canada, and that's from Canadian forests. But as soon as you go across the border, most of the species in SPFs, so like red spruce grown in the US is SPFS. Red spruce grown 5 feet over the border is SPF. Make sense? So there's SPF Glulam, but there's no SPFS Glulam that I'm aware of. And certainly not around here.
So south doesn't refer to the south, it refers to not Canada.
Yeah. And the Canadians.
We are south, believe it or not.
Yeah. Guess who came up with that? As opposed to SPF here. Right. So yes, and so you know we don't have any right now, but you know there have been Glulam manufacturers in the past. Glulam's been around for a long time, since the early 1900s. The issue's been other parts of the country and the world make it cheaper. And so you have issues around labor, cheaper labor elsewhere, cheaper energy costs, and then the species that are currently used for, you know, most Glulam products are a little bit stronger. Maine's like the leaders in all sorts of great research, and so you know they've done work around this over the last couple decades, you know, looking at ways of making Glulam stronger, more effective in the region. I think actually they even had a Glulam manufacturer that started with hemlock. I believe they did, or at least a Glulam manufacturer that got established. This was like 10 years ago or more. And then quickly, because of energy and labor costs, they left. But, so as a result, you have these standardized books, with the different layups. So a uniform standard for, Glulam. So anytime someone's making a certain Glulam beam, you need to get certified. Ricky will talk about that, to a certain standard. And when we were talking about SPFs, there were that layup or that kind of beam exists. But interestingly, you had to go back to publications back in the 90s to actually find it. They just dropped that specific layup because no one was producing it. They said, oh, this functionally is no longer a product, so they dropped it out of that standard. So we had to go all the way back to look at it. But there's opportunity now, just because it may not have worked 20 years ago, or there's been certain dynamics, doesn't mean that's the case now. So there's, all of us are here, we're interested in mass timber, and then also, a big question, it's not this presence absence, like, hemlock or SPFS, Glulam works or it doesn't, it's when does it work? Can it be part of the market? How big a part of the market? And can you capture that? So we're going to move into sort of this case study with New Hampshire Wood Treaters and Laminator. So when we first met them a couple years ago, they had a bunch of people in their garage producing nail laminated timber. So they were just screwing in a bunch of pieces of lumber, and they were creating these panels to use as decking for their sister company, Hanson Bridge. And they said, we can't deal with it. Everyone's got labor issues, so for better quality products and to reduce this labor, challenge, be more productive, we're going to get a Glulam press. So we started that conversation, and Ricky was a tremendous asset in making sure they got certified, and a bunch of other people that I could mention up here. Conservation Fund were funders and just great supporters of this, New Hampshire Timberland Owners Education Foundation, and so on. So thank you to all of them, and I'll turn it over to Ricky.
Cool, thanks Andy. So I'll just talk real briefly about what that process was like, the certification process that New Hampshire Treaters and Laminators went through. I'll also sort of give a little context to what does it look like to actually have a Glulam facility in case anyone is interested in starting one or investing in one or whatnot. Just to start out, like why get certified? Like Andy mentioned, they were already producing Glulam. They were producing it specifically for bridge construction. So there is a different need, a different incentive for using Glulam in building construction. So that's specifically what they got certified for, was use of Glulams in building construction. So the simple answer of why get certified, well, the building code requires it to be certified. Just like if you're going to buy I-joist, you're going to buy a steel beam, you're going to use concrete in your foundation, those products all conform to or are certified according to some pre-established standard. So my slides are these are on time. So anyways, so the standard that you see down underlined in red there is the standard. It's an ANSI standard. AITC, the American Institute of Timber Construction, is sort of the guardian or the keeper of that standard. But anyways, that standard is what we're going to briefly talk about here today. Of course, the other reason that I think getting certified and having a Glulam product certified is good is just giving somebody some comfort to know that it meets this third-party pre-established thing. You can buy Glulam on the market right now that's not certified, and you can use it in construction, but to do that you have to go through a process of basically having a third-party engineer review that specific Glulam and that specific manufacturer. Yeah, these must be on timers. To basically say, yes, it's okay to use in this application, or no, you need to make these adjustments or modifications, or whatever. So that's probably obvious, but I thought it would be worth mentioning. So this is the product standard. So this basically lays out what does the certification process need to look like, but also what does the day-to-day operation of a Glulam facility need to look like. So it covers what Andy mentioned, lamb stock. So what species, what grades are you using, as well as what's the moisture content. There's dimensional tolerances of the lumber, which we'll talk about in a second. That was sort of a big lesson learned with this particular certification. Adhesives is a big part of the equation, right? Making sure you have good spread rate, as they call it. So how thick is the adhesive? How thick or how thin is it applied to each board? Because that's a pretty big impact on how they do or don't act as one entire wood unit, like you mentioned. And then there's a lot that goes into the quality control of getting established first, and then also the day-to-day record keeping and quality control. So this was sort of my thought process, and like what would be the steps to go through. What did New Hampshire treaters and laminators go through? Not necessarily in this exact order, but it's probably fairly similar to this. So the certification agency is a company like they used PLIB, the Pacific Lumber Inspection Bureau, but there's a number of agencies that could do this work. Basically, what that agency is doing is they're sort of this third-party overseer to make sure, yes, this company is conforming to the standard, to put it in very few words. And then every quarter, they're coming back to that facility and auditing it. Are you doing what you said you would do? Are you following this guidebook that you've created? Those types of things. And then that therefore gives this company a stamp, certification they can put on each of their products that says, yes, it's certified according to the standard.
Ricky, can I ask a question about that process really quickly? The question is, one, like, is that a bottleneck? Like, is there the ability to certify anybody right now who would like to be there in our region? And then the second is, what's the cost to do that?
Yeah, first question, is that a bottleneck? I wouldn't say it's a bottleneck. I would say we experienced some hurdles and hiccups, but by the time we got to having a serious certification agency on board, PLIB, and having conversations with them, I wouldn't say that they or their process became a bottleneck. It was basically, they needed some information, we needed to provide some information, so it was really a collaborative process, and they were very good. I would say they were very good to work with in the entire process. Cost-wise, you might know better than I do, but like overall cost.
Yeah.
It
was. Are we allowed to talk? Yeah. So let's say it was, somewhere, let's say around $30,000 or so, ish, in that ballpark, as opposed to $100,000. But it wouldn't surprise me if, depending on the situation and the direction people went, it can be quite a bit more than that. This happened to be a fairly, and let's say tens of thousands of dollars more, not that much more. But yeah, so some in that ballpark, yeah. But I think also just a bottleneck that I see a lot is with smaller businesses, or not a bottleneck, but just a challenge, is like a lot of the quality control and requirements and forms and just all those processes. If you're a small business, it's sometimes, and you're accounting for your time, it may not make sense. It's almost like lumber grading, getting lumber grading certification.
I'm just thinking of like organic certification in agriculture is housed at nonprofit associations that can roll it into their other, like I'm thinking about, could a Woodlands Association become a certifier to drive the cost down if it was prohibited? But that's it came up this morning a little bit, so that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, and just my 2 cents if we're on it is, those standards are there for a reason, probably. So it's important that they have all those things in my mind.
Yeah.
So it's like if there were streamlined processes, there's always the risk of something slipping through. Yeah,
and they need lab access, or they need other things. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've spitballed some ideas too on like, is there something collaboratively the region could do to help address some of these issues, whether it's certification or whether it's like grading, because even like with this project, they're technically taking all number 2 and better SPF South, but there technically is an additional grading step, which is, because according to the ANSI standard, it's not number 2 and better, it's what they call N2 grade lumber, which is a slight but still important step beyond, like you're question about knots. Like you're evaluating a little bit more than what you would do for number 2 grade lumber, you're evaluating for knot size and location. So anyways, and that takes getting the person educated at the facility, which, I mean, it's a small facility. There's basically one person that's running it, making the Glulam, doing the QA/QC every day, right? So there's sort of some constraints there potentially, as well as even like right now they're not set up with a planer, and where we got to is you probably have to have a planer to meet the dimensional tolerances, because number 2 grade lumber coming out of any lumber mill around here, the tolerance limits are very, very tight for lamb stock, for Glulam. So some of those lessons learned, where if there was something where several locations could take advantage of sort of this one central organization or hub doing those things, I think it could help.
So you have to put each piece through a planer before you glue it up?
Yeah, which is a bit repetitive, because that material's already been planed, right? So yeah, if you had the opportunity to purchase rough sawn lumber, and some do this, then plane it yourself to the exact tolerances, that would save a step, but of course, that's an investment, because then you're probably also kiln drying it yourself. So, there's pros and cons of each. Let's see, so that's the lumber side, and then of course, obviously there's the equipment side, and that can range, like, on the low end of the scale, I would say, is what's set up in New Hampshire, which is a press, a glue applicator, and then some QA/QC testing equipment. Versus you could also add finger jointing for longer elements. You could add a planer, you could add kiln drying, you could add a scanner to essentially do machine scanning, a grading of the lumber. Like there's many more steps you can take, but obviously you need the scale of output to be able to justify those capital costs. And then just on the day-to-day basis, the QA/QC, the record keeping, like Andy was talking through. And then the last thing is what I have at the bottom there, optional fabricating fittings and cuts. That's like if you're making a beam, well, it has to be prefabricated for how it's going to connect to the column. Some manufacturers do that, some don't. Some do it by hand, some do it with CNC equipment.
Been part of this project.
So the initial layup or combination of how the laminations stack together, like Andy mentioned, is all number 2 and better SPF South, which is called a combination 24. So there is, in the process of doing this work, we did create a design guide, so it has a lot of design values in it, which I'll share more about a little bit later. But it does have pre-established values, but like Andy mentioned, it's sort of interesting. We had to go back to the 1993 version of the standard to kind of resurrect those values. I think we've talked through most of this. This is the press that you see in the Springfield, New Hampshire facility.
So Ricky, there's a question, but also, yeah, you have to squint real well if you want to see.
I'm squinting here. Sorry.
Yeah, just a question about, you were talking about the press and the glue applicator for the facility. Did you guys run into any challenges of anything with like emissions permits with glue?
That's a good question, not that I'm aware of, but I don't know if they had to deal with that at any level.
Glue's usually pretty low VOC, so.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the stuff is pretty
Just water-based.
innocuous.
Yeah, I think I've got a cut sheet.
Hopefully.
That's why I'm asking.
It's a good question.
Yeah,
but
because
I'm not-
I hear lots of questions or concerns sometimes around the glue and whether or not, especially in a facility that also has kilns and maybe is towards the top end of their emissions permit allowance, if it's something that could be added on.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think you're right. Like low VOCs is what most adhesives have. There's been a lot of concerns too with like formaldehydes in adhesives. So most manufacturers now are using formaldehyde-free adhesive, polyurethane types of adhesives. There are a few manufacturers, glulam manufacturers out west that use, it's called, is it resorcinol formaldehyde, I believe? I think urea formaldehyde is what typically people think of as the bad type of formaldehyde, but there are several types. So this is the adhesive that they use in case you're interested in checking it out, but it's a pretty industry-wide standard adhesive from Loctite. It's coming in New Jersey. So it's interesting, like there's sort of, you think of the scientific end of the spectrum, and then the non-scientific end of the spectrum is they put a piece of painter's tape across the wood, you run it through the glue applicator, you take the piece of painter's tape off, and you weigh it, before and after, and then that's the way to help determine what's the spread rate. And then there's some scientific things you can do to make sure that's in the right ballpark. But you're looking at, obviously, how much glue is spread on, because the main thing you're concerned with is, like we talked earlier about, you want that entire member to act as one. Structurally, for fire purposes, for moisture durability purposes, and all that. The, probably self-explanatory here, but obviously the size of the press, both in terms of its length as well as its depth, is going to dictate how large of a member can be produced. In this case, they're able to produce, I think, almost a 4 foot tall or deep beam, or you can lay that on its edges decking. But their lengths, because they don't have a finger jointer, basically they're capped at what you can buy is usually 16-foot lengths for lamp stock. Here's just a couple of action photos of the press in action, so you can see what it looks like. You can see this side arm here is basically pressing it flush, so all the laminations are flush, and then obviously the hydraulic pistons that come down to press it. Off the top of my head, I think it was a roughly 90-minute press time. One of the interesting things you have to do in the certification process itself is you have to glue two Glulam members essentially. One of them you put in the press right away. The other one you leave without press. The glue's on it, but without press for the maximum amount of time you're allowed to what they call open glue time, which is the glue's on, but you're not pressing it. So you're basically testing both ends of the spectrum so that you're safe whenever in that window of time you can still press the material. So just one of the interesting things you have to do during
When you stack the wood, do you take a look at the end grain and mix it up?
Not typically, you're not required to. That's probably something you would do if you're very concerned with the individual aesthetic of the lumber, but you're not required
Not for
to.
strength.
No. So again, I sort of mentioned this earlier, but one thing that was a lesson learned, I'm going to go back just where my slide is compared. One thing that was a lesson learned was dimensional tolerances. So we basically had to take the lumber to another local mill, get it planed the day of. Ended up working out great, but that's something that they'll have to do going forward is essentially that replaning process. You know, you're checking moisture content. It needs to be a little bit lower than typical graded lumber. I think in the end we were fine. We didn't have to do any additional drying, but you want to be in the 13, 14% moisture content range.
So how you gonna do that with hand wash?
Do the moisture content?
Yeah, I mean, because you said it's very unstable when you go to dry it.
Yeah, it's probably going to have to be air dried, like Andy mentioned earlier.
Air dried and then kiln dried. It takes a little bit longer to kiln dry, but you get to the same spot, and again, or the same moisture content. And again, the way they did it, there wasn't significantly more loss. Somewhere between 7 and 9%, I think, is what they're getting through a number of trials and projects.
Actual pieces of lumber.
So the 2 and better volumes delivered, you lose set or downgrade. So that certain percentage would be downgraded, and that would be 7 to 9% of that total volume, which tends to be pretty consistent with like hardwood. So if you're drying hardwood or hemlock.
Yeah. And then I thought it was kind of interesting to point out some of the day-to-day tests. So these were tests that had to be done to get certified originally, but it's also, all of these tests have to be done every day that a product is manufactured. So even if they're making one beam, they technically need to do the same QA/QC testing. Not at the same number of samples, but they still have to do it. So one of the tests is called the bond line failure test. Basically what you're seeing here is, I'll try to come over here so I don't block the view. What you're seeing here is, this is the Glulam member that's in this, excuse me, and this piece here, this silver piece, is trying to come down and shear off the wood right at the adhesive line. So what you're looking for there is, first of all, how much force does it take to do that, and then once it's failed, you look at the 2 members, and it's sort of scientific, sort of unscientific. I think we became more familiar with it over time as we were both there during the certification process. But you're looking to see, you want to see the wood fail, the wood fiber tear, rather than the adhesive is actually what the failure mode is. So you're trying to force it into the predictability of the wood properties, essentially. So you're doing that a number of times, right? So you don't have any anomalies of one-off samples. And that's something that you're keeping records of. There's also, I think I might have a picture of it. Yeah, this right here. This vessel that you see here. This vessel that you see here is an autoclave. So basically, you put a couple of wood samples in there. You fill it up with water. You put it under pressure. So it's forcing water into the wood. Then you take it out of there, you put it into an oven, you dry back out as fast as you can. It's mimicking wetting and drying cycles over a long period of time. And then you're doing some evaluation of that wood. You're trying to check for adhesive performance for moisture, so that you're able to, these products aren't necessarily intended to be used in permanent exterior applications, but during construction, seasonal changes in humidity and moisture content, there will be some fluctuations, so this test is intended to make sure that the adhesives hold up. And then all of that is like all of that meaning all of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Yes.
Sorry, weren't they just building bridges out of
They were.
that? Did you say it was supposed to be interior?
For this particular adhesive type, yes.
Okay, so that just for that test.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I'll say too about the bridges that they're building is that technically the adhesive is not doing a whole lot structurally, because they're using, these glulams are stacked like this, but then they're turning them on their edge. So basically it's helping keep the panel stable while they erect it, but long term, each individual 2x is what's structurally spanning between these girders. Yeah, exactly. And then all of that is contained in a manual that they have to create and maintain over time. Like I mentioned, the certification agency comes back once a quarter, looks through their manual, looks at what they're actually doing, do they match, and then they're keeping daily records of all of these tests. So like Andy mentioned, it can be, for a small business especially, it can be quite involved to do that record keeping. Obviously it's necessary, but it is a big task. I think, yeah, I'm gonna hand it back to Andy for this part.
So each piece is stamped.
Each piece is stamped, and I think it's actually like, depending on the length of the member, some pieces have to have multiple stamps.
So, yeah, so I just thought it would be nice. I was going to show this slide, but now I'm going to ask everyone to close your eyes and imagine what I'm going to describe here. So this is just sort of, a flow diagram of sort of, oftentimes when we're thinking about this market development, like it's super exciting. We should get, someone producing glulam, and there's all these barriers along the way. And I'd just like to point out some of these challenges. It's all this stuff we're talking about now, but then also, not only do you need a manufacturer that, like with glulam, where there's demand for their product, right? So if there's no demand, no one wants to produce it. No, there's not going to be any demand if no one's supplying it. So not only do you have to work with supply and demand at the same time, but then you find someone like this that's vertically integrated. They can use it for themselves. You don't need all that difficulty. They're willing to do it. So this is where they're at, all right? So let's look at this. And I think it works for them, but it's also very challenging. This is just an example. So, here they are in the process, New Hampshire wood treaters and laminators. And then, they're working with a certification body. They have to get this certification. We talked about that complexity. And then in the green, this is what they're producing. And I tried to, I back of the envelope figured out what their production capacity would be. Let's say it's maybe 600,000 board feet. Could be, quite a bit more than that, but that's sort of my conservative estimate. So that's what they could do a year. For their bridges, they're doing 30,000 feet. So this is what they're producing out of their capacity, and we need to figure out, or a business needs to figure out how they get all of this business in order to be efficiently producing the product. Glulam, this is a commodity. Like, hate saying it, but most wood products, you can look online or go to whatever store, and you can buy someone producing glulam out of a big facility that's cranking these out, have all the efficiencies, and have maximized their production. So how does a small manufacturer like them compete? I think and hope they will, but this is sort of, when we listen to some of our lofty goals, we have to be able to work through these processes or figure out how to help them through that transition of 30,000 feet, to 600,000. So they have their 30,000. I even included their outs. And that's I think we know where they're gonna go. But we could even call it 30,000, so it's 45,000 I have there. But anyway, so they have reject wood. What do they do with that? Then the ones in yellow were potential markets. We don't know what they are. They could get a planer, try to do some structural work and so on. Hopefully that makes sense, at least as I've described it, you know, and you can look at the diagram at some point in the future, but you know, I just really like to keep reinforcing, if you step back or in a role like me or Catherine, you know, we're thinking market development. How do we help these people? How do we get these products out? And these are the challenges that we kind of keep encountering. You know, it's so hard just to get to this spot, and then you have the next hurdle. So, thanks.
And can I ask one final question?
Yeah.
So I've visited the Hanson. You're saying Hanson Bridge is now 2 New England or New Hampshire fabricators, so there are now 2 business entities essentially.
Yeah.
So what they've done is create the vertical integration of the business, but offset the risk by making sure that they have 2 different functional business entities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. And yeah, it's like Chloe up. And so this is, you know, our next case study. So we're working or talking about that supply side. Now here's the demand, separate project, but you can see how it all connects. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy, for putting this all together. Thank you, Ricky, for talking about the certification. My name is Chloe Gross. I am from the Southwest Region Planning Commission. We're in Keene, New Hampshire, and we are working to connect the timber industry to the transportation industry through our Timber for Transit program, which is funded by the Northern Border Regional Commission. Let's see. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I will introduce you to who SWRPC is and how we serve our communities. I'll give you an overview of our recent Timber for Transit award and what we're hoping to accomplish, and then I'll tie it all back to what this has to do with Glulam market development. Am I projecting enough? Okay, good. All right. So Southwest Region Planning Commission is one of New Hampshire's 9 regional planning commissions. RBCs were created by law to serve as technical assistants for member municipalities. So we function as an association of our member municipalities, and we basically serve as the conduit from municipal officials, employees, and our volunteers to the experts, such as the engineering firms, other consultants, and like government agency folks. So we're governed by town-appointed commissioners who then elect our board, who then oversee the staff. It's a whole thing. I'm just getting it straight now. And we essentially serve as a resource. We provide guidance, connections, and technical assistance to a whole variety of topics. And most of our communities are they're small and they're rural and they're run by volunteers who face some pretty steep learning curves. And they have limited capacity, so we also facilitate peer support and information exchange between municipalities, because towns are often just as interested in hearing, well, did this work for our neighboring town, in addition to like, hey, this is also seal of approval from the expert kind of thing. So we have 33 municipalities in the southwestern region of New Hampshire, and another part of our job is to coordinate throughout the whole region, basically to see the big picture. And this bird's eye view really helps us see the overall trends and the needs of our municipalities and the region as a whole, so that our municipalities can focus on the day-to-day of like actually running their communities, because that's really busy and it's a lot of work. So we're in the unique position of being able to see everything of what's going on and serve the whole region, and that can really help us to add some heft to our grant applications like Timber for Transit, and yeah, just serve the whole region. So here's a snapshot of our project areas. These are just our like official project areas. Should I read them out? Would that be helpful? Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
We've got broadband, brownfields, community and economic development, emergency management planning, GIS and mapping, housing, local planning, natural resources, public health, and transportation. So those are like our designated program areas, but we also have bunches of grants that are in between and kind of do all of the above. So there's always something going on. So this, having all of these topics really helps us understand where the challenges are for our municipalities and where we can serve to like fill the gap kind of thing. We're proactive in seeking these resources to address the local needs and help break down silos between these subject matter areas. And then we also just help our towns and our other partners see the connections between different fields, such as transportation and land use. So now that you know a little bit about SWRPC, let's jump into Timber for Transit, and we have Sarah Waring here, who's gonna say a few words, kind enough to tell us a little bit about Timber for Transit and NBRC. Yeah, set the stage a bit.
Thank you, Chloe. So the Northern Border Regional Commission is a federal-state partnership. We fund a number of different activities in different sort of sectors, but one of our biggest sectors is really thinking about how we can incentivize the forest economy. We get funding from a number of different appropriations bills. One of them comes through the Federal Highway Administration. And what they specifically have in their appropriations that come to us is a mandate to use domestically sourced wood products in transportation and transportation adjacent infrastructure. So what that means is pedestrian bridges, rail bridges, vehicular bridges, but then also like, you know, trail bridges or ATV and snowmobile bridges and pavilions that are sitting right next to a rail trail access point. So we run a competitive grant program for Timber for Transit twice a year. We have another one called Forest Economy that does sort of even more of this, but it is not transit specific. It's much broader and includes things like workforce development. We, as a federal state funder, don't fund directly to the businesses. So we are funding the ecosystem that is around our businesses. So like technical assistance, you know, the universities that are doing some of the research work, or in this case, the feasibility of a specific kind of project. And I'll just say what's exciting about this Regional Planning Commission project is that ideally the feasibility then turns into implementation. So the more we can put some feasibility money out there to test the model and run the economic model and get a sense of where, you know, who's going to source what, the more we can see a really clear path to like how to actually build the infrastructure. So that's my quick version, Chloe. I hope that worked for you.
Yeah, that was great. Essentially that's what we're doing. We're trying to get everything ready, all this pre-development stuff, so that our municipalities have the resources that they need to put these bridges and other infrastructure into action. So in the Monadnock region, we're hoping to find out, like, hey, are there potential projects that can be used with timber products, and how can we make that a reality? So by the end of our grant, we're hoping to have a few specific objectives. So we want to have shovel-ready transportation and infrastructure projects in our underserved rural communities. The vast majority of our communities are rural and they're small, and some are significantly economically disadvantaged. So being able to provide these municipalities with concrete plans for how to revitalize some of their infrastructure could really be beneficial for the towns, but also getting these projects over the finish line. We will have a detailed understanding of the feasibility of incorporating innovative forest products into specific transportation infrastructure projects. It's one thing to say, like, hey, let's use local wood to build our local bridges, but it's a whole other thing to try to figure out, is that actually possible in this place, in this time? We will have helped build a stronger market case for using local tree species and sawn timber and engineered wood products. We're specifically looking at eastern hemlock and domestic spruce pine fir. The Glulam for SPFs is already on its way, and we're learning a lot more about the obstacles and the opportunities around integrating eastern hemlock into the market here, specifically for Glulam and the mass timber layups. So Timber for Transit really emphasizes the local supply chain, and our project seeks to showcase how these projects in particular fit into the Monadnock region. We will have generated increased knowledge and capacity among Cheshire County municipalities and others in the Northern Border Regional Commission service area to rehabilitate, adapt, or completely replace bridges utilizing timber-based products. Again, the goal of our project is to connect the timber industry to the transportation industry, really serving as that conduit. That's what RPCs do. And we can show as an example of potential projects, and then really just encourage the development of the market as a whole. So we see this work as part of a bigger picture that includes outcomes over the short term and the long term. Some of the direct benefits that will be more immediate include reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from like the physical infrastructure, because we're using less concrete and steel. Enhanced transportation options for rural communities, better trail networks, linked sidewalks to rail trails, footbridges, etc., and expanded opportunities for outdoor recreation and potential for tourism, because tourism is a big thing in New Hampshire.
Wouldn't you say that aesthetics is also a benefit?
Aesthetics is also a benefit, yeah. Part of this project is seeking to have some of these projects show as examples of mass timber can actually fit with the aesthetic of the Monadnock region. It's not this some like big, scary foreign thing. It actually can fit really nicely. So, yeah, definitely. So, indirect benefits that are going to be more long-term and potential, no promises, but this is what we hope for. Increases in jobs, wages, and revenue for firms that harvest, process, and transport these forest products that have applications in the transportation sector, so specifically, and a better and more integrated forest to bridge value chain for our local products in the Monadnock region, but also in the MBRC service area as a whole. So our project by itself is not going to create a whole new market, but it is one piece in this big puzzle, and we're glad to be part of that. Okay, so our process. Our grant goes through 2027, and we just started. That little arrow says we are here, and it points to the first bullet. So we're very much in the beginning. Right now, we're looking to form a working group. Then we're going to create an inventory of potential projects, solicit engineering and other pre-development services. We're going to be updating the existing timber bridge superstructure plans, assessing the feasibility of expanding the manufactured wood products industry in the region, ultimately creating a guidebook for our municipalities, and overall just coordinating with our local and regional stakeholders. Not all of these steps need to be achieved sequentially, and they're not all going to be achieved sequentially, but this does provide us a good framework with how we're going to go about trying to make this a reality. So, yeah, we're just in the beginning. Final reiteration, we're just in the beginning, and we're definitely still learning a lot, for sure. Okay, so number one, we are forming a work group right now. This will include mass timber professionals, timber industry folks, municipal officials, New Hampshire Department of Transportation employees, a U.S. Forest Service forest products laboratory experts, and all of these people together know much more than we do about the timber industry and how to build a bridge. Again, we're the conduit. We're not actually the experts on this, so we're just trying to link. And yeah, we help the experts understand what the municipalities need, and we help the municipalities understand what the experts are actually saying. So we're kind of in the middle. So we also have a sub-agreement with UNH Extension, just for this reason. We're super fortunate to be working with Andy with all of his existing knowledge and experience. Andy will be leading on the industry development portions of this project. He's the forest industry specialist. Okay, so
Chloe, can I ask a quick question about your work?
yes.
One of the things that we've found with our Timber for Transit funding is that our departments of transportation across our 4 states are also not up on the applications of these products. So I guess my question is sort of like, what are you finding is one of the, what are the challenges in working with the Department of Transportation, and are you finding that there is actually a there in terms of figuring out how to combine the 2 sets of verbiage and language and specifications and knowledge?
Yeah, so I believe we did receive a letter of recommendation from New Hampshire DOT in our application for this project. So from my understanding, they are in the loop with this particular project. Again, we're still in the beginning.
We haven't started that work yet.
Yeah, so we're still trying to reach out, figure out who in DOT is the right contact for us.
Well, if you find a rock star, let us know, because we will ship them around the region so that they can convince other departments of transportation.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're still in the process of trying to find that. But yeah, I mean, everyone is busy, emails, funding everything, so still in the process. Okay, so an inventory of our potential projects. We're in the process of collecting these project nominations right now, but here are some that were part of our application and have been recommended by our municipalities. So this first one is the Fort Hill Trail Railroad Trestle Bridge in Hinsdale. So this goes over the Connecticut River. Right now, the bridge is abandoned, but it has a capacity to link Hinsdale, New Hampshire to Brattleboro, Vermont. The initial assessment was actually completed by UNH engineering students and showed significant potential for mass timber structures like observation platforms, recreation facility options, and non-motorized traffic bridge. So
you would be using the glulams in addition to the existing structure?
yeah, so we would be using the mass timber and potentially glulam to build the actual deck. And then if there were other recreation facilities that they wanted to put on the bridge, we'd use it for that as well. So there's another trestle bridge in Hinsdale, and this is a Hinsdale-Brattleboro Greenway. And so there was a new bridge. You can see the curved part that was opened this winter, and it essentially left the 2 trestle bridges in the island out of use. And the Hinsdale-Brattleboro Greenway has been in progress conceptually for a very long time. So potentially using Timber for Transit funds will help to make these dreams a reality. The hope is to transform the old infrastructure into a greenway that could serve as a recreational and tourist attraction. Potential timber applications also include bathroom facilities, an amphitheater with seating, docks for recreational boaters, and exhibit platforms for art installations. This third bridge is Hill Road Bridge over the Darby Brook in Alstead. So this bridge failed in 2012 and was temporarily replaced by 2 single-lane steel logging bridges. And this is a short span bridge that could serve as a great example of the strength of mass timber because it needs to withstand logging operations and gravel operations that run on that road. And it could be an example of how we can fix some of these short span bridges that may not qualify for other types of funding, state and federal. And lastly, here is a picture of Crescent Bridge, which is in Swansea. So it's one of our 10 covered bridges in the region. And the idea is to build a pedestrian bridge, either on or adjacent to this existing bridge. An attached or cantilever bridge would link the rail trail on one side to the sidewalk on the other side. Currently, all traffic, including bikes and pedestrians, has to go through the tunnel, and it's a single-lane tunnel and it's dark, so kind of dangerous. So it would be great to have some kind of pedestrian crossing, and what kind of crossing that will be will depend on the historic preservation requirements. But it could be attached or cantilevered. So, and again, this one is a great example of how mass timber can fit with the aesthetic of the Minnetonka region. So in order to actually do any of this, we need to solicit technical assistance from engineering firms and pre-development services. This engineering experience, this assistance will include feasibility studies, pre-engineering concept development, cost assessments, and then ultimately the shovel-ready engineering plans. So procurement will be conducted through a competitive process that's compliant with NBRC requirements and state and federal policies and procedures. Ideally, we're looking for a firm or firms that have knowledge of options for structural properties for solid wood, mass timber, and composite bridges. Knowledge of engineered wood, in particular Glulam, structural engineering experience, and then just generally knowing what's up about mass timber. Another part of this project, there are many parts of this project, is updating the existing U.S. Forest Service Forest Products Laboratory Timber Bridge Superstructure plans, which is quite a mouthful, to include local species and our local manufacturing capabilities, so in particular sawn wood and glulam. So we're working with Jim Wacker at the Forest Products Laboratory to identify these existing plans and which ones might be suitable for retrofitting for these northeastern species. And these plans, if they're calibrated to these northeastern species, would obviously be relevant for Hampshire, Vermont, the rest of the NBRC region as a whole. And creating this avenue for potential products to be used in these transportation projects has a potential to generate demand, especially for the innovative products such as the one that he discussed. So since these plans were not developed with the northeastern species in mind, a lot of them are calibrated for southern yellow pine or for western species. And thanks to Andy's advice, we're also considering the method of manufacturing. He pointed out that it does not make much sense to try to recalibrate a stress-laminated structure because no one in the region has the ability to manufacture stress-laminated mass timber, hence glulam. And having that whole continuity of the local species to the local manufacturing will help us build the local supply chain. So we there are contenders for these plans, and they mostly include Glulam stringer bridges, which is what you see up here, and designs that use Glulam decking, longitudinal or transverse. So I'm going to toss it over to Andy for a minute or two to talk more about plans.
Yeah, and I just
Can I
want
ask a question before you do that? What are your criteria? Are you picking all 4 of these, or they have to go through each of these stages to get preliminary drawings, designs, costing? What are your criteria for selection? I'm confused. Of the 4.
So we're still collecting nominations, and we're also still making up our working group. We don't have a set criteria list yet.
Okay.
We're like really at the beginning.
Got it. I might just suggest that would be helpful before you go through all of this, that you have some sort of criteria list, some sort of judging that you're going to go against.
Yeah, so that will, our working group will help us figure out what do we need for the specific bridges and what projects. We'll actually work with Mass Timber. Yeah.
It's
Andy,
that,
do you
it's
have
cost, it's time, there's a number of other factors so that you're within the grant time and everything else, manufacturing capability. You know, particularly for a large project like this that you're going to manufacture and put things together, it's knowing those criteria up front often helps a bit.
Yeah.
Not just from an academic and emotional perspective, but from a factual, I gotta get this stuff on the ground and get this stuff out now.
So this grant also doesn't include any of the construction.
No, I understand that, but part of that is the criteria, right, of which you have that is funding invitations.
So I think, so that's a good point. So there's the red list bridges, and that was part of the criteria as I understand it. So
Okay.
the towns have said these are our priorities in the region.
Okay.
And you know, Chloe identified a process whereby a group's gonna get pulled together, there's gonna be, you know, designs related to those specific priority projects. And so that's kind of helping those specific towns. In addition to that is sort of these general bridge plans. And so I'll just point these out. So over the last, you know, over the last 35 years, what's that?
Who makes the decision in the end? Do the towns then decide whether they're going to go forward with each project separately, or is there a commission, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's the towns.
Every town would then choose to do this for
Or
themselves.
not.
Yeah.
Got it.
But municipal bridges across the region are in significant disrepair. So this is actually a pretty big market across the region.
Oh, I know the Brattleboro ones because I lived in Amherstsphere, so I know how that works.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that would be part of the criteria is, you know, a town wanting to move forward and then they would do it. But then, so in addition to these specific projects, you know, and assessments and so on, just looking at timber bridges generally, the Forest Service has been doing this for like 35 years and they're the ones. Yeah, so what I love about this project, I love and respect so much when folks recognize the expertise and the roles of other entities and pull together that synergy. So as we were going through this, they were saying, well, you know, we want to deal with these specific projects on the Red List Bridge, but also we just want to make it as accessible as possible for towns to be able to access, you know, plans to do this. Let's come up with a guide to do that perhaps. And we said, well, Forest Service had already done that. And then they realized there's AASHTO standards that others may be familiar with, but you know, Highway Department standards. So the old plans that the Forest Service went through doesn't conform to those new standards. So that's just, so towns could go through it and pull those off and go through a bunch of calculations, but instead we're reducing that problem, we're reducing that barrier. So once again, towns can pull off Forest Service plans off the shelf with heavy timber and do those heavy timber bridges. Then the next is the Glulam superstructures. So we go, oh great, well maybe some of these, you know, bridges can use Glulam, let's do it, let's support it. But it's easy again to have these unintended consequences. There's no Glulam product for SPFs or Eastern Hemlock. So if we said, hey, do these Glulam products, we're guaranteeing to not include the Northeast. We're eliminating us. And so it's how do we then open up. So, you know, that's the second part of this with the superstructure piece is now we're including the Northeast and at least it's an option. We're entering the market. You know, how much of the market we capture, we don't know. And then, we're talking ourselves about, all right, what are the designs, superstructure designs? So stress laminated timber doesn't make sense since no manufacturers are doing that or are planning to do it. So let's at least, let's at least create an environment where a private business could and would want to do this. And so that's basically most of what I was talking with here is just this great, I respect them so much because I think it's very easy for folks to come in to a grant and go, well, we're gonna get the grant, we're gonna make these guides for people. But it takes a lot of leadership, I think, to realize and know how to make it better, and that's what they've done. So thank you, hats off. Yeah, so that's basically what I was saying. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're not timber experts, and throughout this whole project, we're really just going to be learning a lot, especially about the complexity of the manufactured wood industry and the feasibility of expanding it in our region. So Andy, of course, is key to this part of the puzzle, and was to understand our place in all of this. What we do know now is that there's limited manufacturing for these innovative wood products in the NBRC service area and the surrounding region, which presents a real barrier to realizing the full benefits of these innovative wood products, especially in transportation infrastructure for our project in particular. Mass timber production for these northeastern species exists, and Glulam layups such as SPFs exist, and eastern hemlock is on its way. But again, without the demand for products, it's really hard for a facility to stay afloat and be financially viable, even though there is general sentiment that there is potential for the Northeast to support a mass timber industry. And so at SWRPC, our Timber for Transit project aims to, again, build these connections between the sectors and add whatever value that we can to the decades of work that have already been done in mass timber research and commercialization throughout the region and the country. So when all is said and done, we are hoping to have a timber bridge guidebook that we can distribute to our member municipalities. Again, we just want to reduce barriers for our municipalities to build these bridges with these local timber products and foster the ongoing collaborations between the two sectors. This goes hand in hand with Glulam market development and encouraging the mass timber industry to grow in the Northeast. This guide will hopefully include everything from these updated timber bridge plans to potential funding opportunities to options for consultants to just general lessons learned by the non-experts as we wade into this world. Returning to our main goal, we at Southwest Region Planning Commission are here to bridge the gap, connecting the timber product sector to the transportation sector, and making it easier for our member municipalities to implement these timber bridges. We hope to do this by showing that local timber products can be used for local transportation projects in our region, by adding value to these cross-sector collaborations, and by encouraging the development of the engineered wood supply chain. So, thank you for everyone who put this together, and let me know if you have any questions.
I have a question. So, Andy, you talked about some of the challenges that you and I have to navigate with market development and supply, demand, chicken and egg problem never ends. And so I'm curious with the planning commission, like who called who? Like, did you guys want to do timber bridges? Did you just need bridges? Identify the bridges were needed and then someone told you, hey, timber might be a good option? I'm just curious how this connection, like how did this start?
Yeah, so we applied for the Timber for Transit grant. So that was kind of the.
But like what made you think to do that? Like, why did you think that timber bridges or timber for transit was the way to go as opposed to something else?
That was before my time.
Okay, totally fine.
So as I understand it, you know, they were looking at the grant and looking at red list bridges, and then the selectman in Allsted was a timber framer and actually started the Timber Framers Guild, and you know was very supportive of using wood. Business Economic Affairs in New Hampshire, a gentleman Steve Fortier, who's awesome, just fantastic. You know, he's like, oh, you know, there's a bunch of folks you should talk. Well, I'm saying he's awesome, you know, but he brought
He is
me in.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
You know, and so he's like, you know, you should talk to a bunch of other people, and then, you know, a larger group all got together, and we included DOT for an initial meeting, and, you know, all those different stakeholders.
I guess giving you another case study from a different part of the country, there's a thermally treated cross-laminated timber mill out in Washington State, which is using Western hemlock, thermally treating it, and DoD is the client. The DoD wants basically prefab housing for overseas deployments, and they've designed and tested with the Army Corps of Engineers prefab structure, which they're calling a 2 by 12 by 24, where it basically sits in 2 shipping containers, which are all made by cross-laminated timber. It takes 12 guys, 24 hours to erect a structure. So DoD, just like DOT, is obligated to buy American, and you know and they're going to be testing those structures this summer in Missouri at a DoD facility in Alaska for conditions. But that might be another sort of, I think what we're all looking for is a seed market, and the public sector.
The public sector is the seed market. I mean, to get back to your question, like a lot of grant funding and federal funding can go into publicly owned infrastructure, whether it's transportation infrastructure or like, I mean, we funded a museum, right, expansion, and public housing can be subsidized to use but the hard part is like managing the capital stack.
Right.
Federal money can be a pain in the neck.
Particularly now.
But like DoD and then FEMA also was looking at prefab buildings after wildfires to put people in instead of those like horrible trailers that then just sit in somebody's field. So
my question is, were you guys gonna be able to share these PowerPoint?
I'm gonna ask if we can actually share the PowerPoint and dub over this audio, so you can go on and see the PowerPoints. But Ricky has a couple more things to say. I don't know if we want that audio or not, but also.
Do we have time? We're already 2 minutes
Yeah.
over.
But I think we'd all love to keep talking as long as
Do you have to stamp every beam?
Yeah.
Engineering has to stamp every beam?
Or no, a grader, so when we're making the CLT, you know, it's gotta go
So just have to
for the
grade it.
Glulam, yeah, it's gotta get
I
graded.
mean, you don't have to have an engineer stamp every.
Quick question. So where is the one New England Glulam plant?
The plant, no, yeah, so it's Springfield, yeah, Springfield, New Hampshire, Hampton Bridge.
Isn't the low hanging fruit that the sawmill would set up a press and just add that to their daily work of products?
In theory, I would say potentially, but it's a big shift for, you know.
You said the certification process is tens of thousands.
Yeah.
So also we have a lot of like pine mills, so pine's a little bit weaker. So what pine mill would you, or any mill you are in the Northeast, why would you set up a Glulam line if no one specs your products and none of the plans have SPFs or hemlock specifications? If all the plans spec'd up for southern yellow pine, why in New England would you ever set up a Glulam facility? And that's part of our challenge. So how do you get that? And there's, you know, that's not the only issue, but that's a big barrier, you know. So
This is, I know I'm not going to go through all these because I don't have time, but the last thing I would leave you with is this. After all of the headbanging that maybe we've done over the past several years and today, you know, I think we have to all recognize that some good progress has been made, and you can right now get CLT products and Glulam products made from species sourced, milled, planed within New England. So I think it's good, right, to know that. So if anybody is working on projects, you can start to specify these products. Know that there are restraints, there are limitations, there's challenges for sure, but you can do that. These products are available today, and hopefully by more projects speccing them, it will then lead to more manufacturers seeing the interest there and expanding or opening operations.
That's such a good point, and it's not just, you hear again and again, when will it come? It's literally, you pick up the phone. Right now, anyone can pick up the phone, order the product. And if people know that, and know where to go, that's amazing. So thanks for just. Thank you.